So my name's Woodley. I'm founder and director of CSCCE. And what I thought I would do today is take us on a little bit of a tour of some of CSCCE's resources, but rather than just kind of going through a list of the many things that we have, I thought that we would approach this by answering 5 questions about building communities. And I'm going to point to various resources that help us answer those questions. So it is a snapshot of all of the things that we have. And I do encourage you to have a look at the website as well. And then as we get into discussion after the presentation, if there are other things that are on your mind, other things that you would like examples of, then we can definitely go into more detail in those as we get to them. Now, first of all, I'd like to kind of start by framing things by saying that culture change is probably something that all of us are focused on, right? So whatever our specific contexts with our OSPOs, with our universities, it's likely that we are thinking about how to support changes in behaviour, maybe to support open technologies, to support greater transparency around the way that work gets done, or maybe to support more collaborative approaches to the way that we do work. And communities are really a vessel for culture change, right? We can kind of think of them as the container in which we gather people that are interested in that change. And we kind of experiment with how we want to do things differently. And from those communities, from that community unit, we can then propagate out that behavior change more broadly across the ecosystem. So communities are really vitally important for the work that we want to do. Gathering together in these groups is really crucial. And that leads us on to a second thing that I want to have in mind as I'm going through the presentation, which is that we can convene at multiple levels of scale. So this word community is used a lot, right? It's used in lots of different contexts. We use it to refer to related but sometimes distinct things. And I just want to draw the difference between thinking about an individual community, so multiple individuals who are coming together with common interests and goals, and then some of these meta-level gatherings that we have. So we could think of Curious perhaps as a community of communities, right? You're all representing your own communities, and then you're coming together within Curious to see what can be learned at that meta level to support you all. And then we're all part of a broader ecosystem, and that ecosystem may have communities of communities within it, and it may have individual communities. And we're all kind of sharing a space where there are overlapping missions, probably overlapping funding sources, and maybe even overlapping members. You know, members may be able to move between different communities. And one of the reasons that I'm emphasizing this is as I go through the presentation and I highlight these 5 questions, you might think about these at the OSPO level. You might think about them in terms of your convening and how you're bringing folks together within your university contexts. But you might also think about the individuals that you are convening and how they themselves might have communities around their projects, right? So the questions work at multiple levels of scale. And we can get into this some more in the discussion at the end if that's of interest. Okay. So as we think about this convening in communities and community being a vehicle for culture change, human infrastructure, people and the various practices and rituals that we have together in community are really essential for healthy and productive communities. So we're not really going to see all of the benefits of gathering together unless we're thinking very intentionally about how we're doing that gathering. And ideally having somebody or multiple people who are really nurturing that community and thinking very deliberately about how it is that we come together. But it's only relatively recently that we're starting to recognize just how important that is. And we call that function community management. And you may or may not have community manager within your job title. It doesn't matter either way. But we know that there is not necessarily a lot of recognition for these roles yet, nor has there previously been a lot of support. And so why CSCCE exists is to provide that support, the resources, the training for folks who are thinking about community convening, and also to support organisations that are intending to be more community oriented. So we work both with individual community managers and also work with organisations and specific projects that are looking to do community engaged work. So that leads me on to introduce the centre in a bit more detail. So our mission is to champion the importance of human infrastructure for effective collaboration. So basically, we want to make sure that communities are set up for success and the people that are managing those communities have access to resources to be successful, shared language to be able to talk to one another, training if they need it, consultancy if they want to work with us in more detail, and access to each other so that you can compare notes about what you're doing and learn about different tools and best practices that have worked in different situations. So we have 4 broad sets of activities that we do to support this mission. So the first thing is developing and publishing resources, and I'm going to highlight just a small number of these today. If you do have the website up, you will hopefully see that along the navigation at the top, there's a resources tab, and there's now, I think, 13 different curated pages along different topical themes. We also provide various professional development opportunities. That's the dog joining in, sorry for that. We provide various professional development opportunities. So we run various online trainings, workshops, webinars, and as I mentioned, we also do consultancy. So you can find out more about the trainings on the trainings tab. And then we conduct a small amount of research to really help us be able to compare across communities what's happening and to look at different community manager roles and be able to understand what they look like and the different context in which community managers work. And then finally, we can convene a community of practice of nearly 900 community managers across a whole range of different contexts and different locations. So there's these sort of 4 broad areas that we have. And today, I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. So I'm going to highlight some resources, and I'm also going to highlight some of our trainings and some of our consultancy projects that we've done. Okay, so all of the resources that I mentioned today are available to download for free from Zenodo. So you can go directly to our library page on Zenodo. That doesn't necessarily curate things by topical theme. So if you would like an easier route through things, I do recommend having a look at the thematic resource pages on the website. And that includes things like a glossary, various information about running events, community programming, and various other things besides. So let's start off with, let's go second, to the various trainings. So I'm not going to go into detail with these now, just to make you aware that they exist, and then I will flag some of them up as I go through our 5 questions. But as of now, we currently have 5 multi-week courses available for general registration or for private cohorts. So you can either come along and sign up as an individual whenever we next offer a course, or we do work with various folks to schedule private cohorts for their projects, for their organisations, for their institutes. And these range from our entry-level course, which is Community Engagement Fundamentals, that really sets the foundations around community management, to these more advanced courses on specific topics, from managing documentation to thinking about strategic communications, project management, and the specific challenges of working with online communities. And all of these trainings are hosted in a learning management system called Canvas, and that enables us to share things like learning objectives, the slides, the pre-reading materials, as well as managing assignments. And again, if anybody's interested in learning more about Canvas, we can talk about that at the end as well. Now, those multi-week trainings, they typically range from 6 to 8 weeks, and we have a couple of sessions a week. If that's too much of a commitment, we also have various mini workshops, and these range from 90 minutes to a couple of hours. And they're on standalone topics like designing and planning for successful collaborations, so the kinds of questions you should ask at the beginning, and various ways to set the collaboration up for success. more information about things like planning meetings and events, and things like how to make decisions in a more engaged, more collaborative way, and giving and receiving feedback. And then later this year, we're also going to get into topics like project and community governance and organizational homes for projects. And then finally, we do have a certification program. So we're really proud of this. We launched this in 2023, and this is an advanced multi-component program for folks who are dedicated community managers. So we're typically spending the majority of their time thinking about convening. And they progress through the program by taking 2 core courses, an elective, and then various mini workshops and quarterly skill shares. Again, I can go into that in a little bit more detail at the end if folks would like to know more about that. So that's kind of the broad brushstrokes in terms of the resources and trainings that we have. But to kind of embed this in something that perhaps feels a little bit more tangible, I'm going to share 5 questions you might want to consider as you're thinking about convening communities, or the folks that you work with are thinking about convening communities around their own projects, and highlight some resources as I go. So question number 1 is really starting right at the beginning, and it's asking, how well do you understand who is in your community, and then who is around that community, who is in the broader ecosystem that may be interacting with the outputs of that particular community. And so if it helps, you can try and diagram this out. So this is something that we encourage folks to do as part of our community engagement fundamentals course, and try and define what the structure is of the community itself. It could be that there are multiple different types of members. There could be folks at different career stages, folks that represent different roles or different functions. And the community might house various subgroups. So you can get really creative in terms of imagining the various things that already happen or that you might like to happen in the future. And then you can think about things like which other communities maybe you are interacting with within the ecosystem. So maybe there's sharing of resources, maybe there's a working group that brings together individuals across the communities. And then maybe there are other stakeholders such as funders, or other senior representatives that you are interacting with around specific things. So really starting off there and asking who is within the community, and then who's outside it that might be interacting with the community in some way. This is something that we go into quite a lot of detail in as part of the Community Engagement Fundamentals course, and it's also something that we do as part of consultancy with helping folks to get their communities set up. So there are various ways of doing interviews and surveys, of really understanding the needs of specific members or potential members in the community, and the various barriers that they might have to participation in the community, so that you can really design something that is going to resonate with them and therefore engage them. The second question is, what could members do together that they couldn't do by themselves? So really the secret sauce of community is finding that thing that enables us to learn, create, or share something together that we wouldn't be able to do by ourselves. And so once you've got these different member types identified by answering question 1, you can then diagram this out to answer question 2 by saying, well, if these group of members have these particular goals and these other members have a different goal, where's the overlap in the middle? You know, what is the thing that we really want to do? So member A could be really motivated to pay things forward. They might be more advanced in their career and have knowledge to share. And member B might want to specifically design some kind of training program, and they've got expertise in that. And so they might come together to specifically design a program with mentorship that is aimed at supporting folks earlier in their careers. So if you're able to diagram this out, this then suggests to you the specific activities that you might want to do within your community to really get folks engaging around something that is the unique value that these members bring. Now, if you're thinking that you've got more than 2 different member types, which is highly likely, it may be more complicated than a simple Venn diagram. So sometimes this ends up looking like a flower with multiple overlapping petals, right? And so there may be a large purpose, and then there may be these multiple shared goals within the flower. So you can get a little bit creative diagramming this out. But it can also be helpful to ask, whether there is a single purpose or whether there are multiple purposes. And you then can decide whether you're going to address all of them, or maybe you need to just focus on one, depending on the resources that you have available. And then also asking who articulated that purpose first. Sometimes you will have what feels like a real grassroots resonance around a need, and multiple people will be coming to you and saying, we need to solve this problem. There's this thing that we've got to address together. And that can feel like it generates a lot of almost organic momentum. In other cases, it can be that an individual has identified a need, maybe they've written a grant or they've got funding to solve that need, and it's then about finding other people to come and engage with a specific project in order to meet the defined goals. And those can provide different kinds of challenges, depending on what your starting point is for how you actually do the convening. And then question number 3 is, how might you support multiple modes of participation in your community? So you may or may not have already seen this diagram. So one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning is how useful it is to have shared language, shared mental models to talk about the community building work that we're all doing. As I said, a lot of these words have gotten very overextended, and that can make it hard to know whether when I'm talking about something and you're talking about something, we're actually referring to the same thing. So one of the frameworks that we created to really address this challenge is the CSCCE community participation models. This is what we're looking at here. And this describes 4 modes of member engagement that can occur within a community. So that's the convey, consume, contribute, collaborate, and co-create. And then there's this champion mode that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And so we can see from the network diagrams that we've got here a kind of the convener of the community pushing information out. So it doesn't really feel very connected and members aren't really interacting with each other. And as we move across the diagram, we see that the role of the convener shrinks down deliberately in size, and we're having member-to-member interactions, some of which are happening without the direct involvement of the community manager, the community convener. And so within any community, you're going to have a range of these different modes, and your members are going to engage in different modes depending on how interested they are in the topic, depending on the capacity that they have to engage at this particular point in time. And so you're going to want to identify various pathways in your community that speak to the different modes. And so we describe this in more detail with examples of each of the modes, what these can look like in the first part of our community participation model guidebook. Again, that's on Zenodo, and it's also listed on the website. So question 3 is, now that you know who's in your community or who you'd like to be in your community, now you've identified what the purpose of the community is and what you think members can uniquely create together in community, how are you going to design these multiple different ways for them to engage around the community's purpose? And then if we put all 3 of these questions together, this is really what we get at in our community engagement fundamentals course. So it's an 8-week course. It's been running since 2020, and we've reached over 350 learners now. And learners meet twice a week. So we do a lesson and then we do a collab, which is more collaborative, to build out a community engagement plan for their communities. So they're really getting down into the details of who their members are, what the member needs are, and then how the particular activities and the events and the content that is being created within the community is supporting members in coming together to work on their shared purpose. And what you graduate with is a lightweight engagement plan in poster format. So that enables you to then go and have conversations with others about what the plan is and work on that together. The second course that I want to flag here, which really relates to what I was just talking about with the community participation model, is our content design or code course. And this is really a course in 2 parts. So the first part of the course really gets at how do I make really engaging content that is actually going to engage community members in doing something. So if you're writing a newsletter, for example, or maybe writing up a blog post, or even like a white paper summary of an output from a working group, you are likely to want to get input on those particular things. And so we go through the best practices for creating really standout content. And then we get into the details of how do you take a really key piece of content, so something like a report based on a survey that you might have done, or a white paper that you want to get detailed feedback on, and how do you create a campaign that gives your members kind of multiple ways to engage with that content in slightly more bite-sized chunks? And this can be really useful. So if you've got a report, for example, it could be that you want to run a webinar and you want to highlight the key takeaways. It could be that you take the 5 key takeaways and have 5 separate blog posts about them. And so this course kind of gets at that new sort of strategic thinking about how we think about content as this catalyst for bringing folks together in a community. And if all this sounds kind of intriguing, there are new guidebooks that have been published about this. So these were published earlier this year, and those are available on the website. So again, on the resources pages, you can look for the community engaged content page, and you can see the guidebooks and a new accompanying glossary that defines some of these terms. So this is all relevant to questions 1, 2, and 3. So we then get on to question 4, which is how might you make participation easier by providing scaffolding materials? And we specifically have defined this term scaffolding as the supportive information, activities, and processes, so it's not just documentation, that can address barriers to participation that might exist for members. So you answered question 1, who's in your community, what do they need, what's stopping them engaging? And scaffolding is one way that you can lower those barriers to really help folks be able to access and engage in whatever it is that you're doing together in your community. And so scaffolding can both lower barriers to participation, and those barriers can be informational, technical, or related to a sense of belonging. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. And also scaffolding can support multimodal participation. So if you think about these 4 different pathways, 4 different ways that folks might engage within a community according to the participation model, scaffolding can help folks move from one mode into a deeper engaged mode, right? If you're providing the information that they need to be able to more deeply engage, then you can move folks across the participation model. And so scaffolding can be really useful because it could be that folks just don't know where to find anything. You know, there might be a lack of information available about what is expected of them, right? Or even what is happening. Oh, you have a monthly webinar. I didn't know that was the case, right? So you're thinking very intentionally about how do you onboard folks? How do you make information visible and discoverable? It could be a lack of technical information, right? It could be that folks don't know how to use a particular tool that you are using. It could be that you're archiving your information somewhere on a site and a login is needed for that, and folks don't know how to access that. Or it could be that folks are not sure what they're able to bring to the community. Are they welcome here? What particular things are they empowered to be able to talk about? And again, scaffolding can make all of this much more explicit, therefore reducing any of these barriers to participating. So some examples of this, it could be that you have a new member welcome pack. So we have one of these when folks join our community of practice. It could be an onboarding survey. So as folks come to you, you may not know what they need. And you might have a quick survey that asks everybody the same set of questions so that you can then start pairing people to resources or working groups or activities that will be most relevant for them. You might offer a welcome call. So folks might come and get to know you actually via a conversation. Or you might provide pre-prepared resource folders. So if you're inviting community members to step up and lead something on behalf of the community, you're scaffolding out some of the materials that they need so that this is really seamless and easy to do. It could be a Slack quick start guide. So our community of practice is on Slack. We don't assume that everybody knows how to use it. Some folks still haven't used Slack before, so we have a quick guide to help with that. It could be tips for authors of guest blog posts. So again, not everybody has written a blog post before. You might have some specific guidelines. We also have logistic sheets for our courses. So again, making it really clear how we do various things, what the expectations are in terms of attendance and graduation, and the various tools that we use. So each of these that's got a star next to it, these materials are all available CC BY, so they're free to reuse and remix with attribution via the website. So they're hosted on Zenodo again. But if you go to the scaffolding resources, you can find things like this new member welcome pack, and you're very welcome to remix that to share the information specific to your communities. And then we can also think about a higher order structure of scaffolding. So a playbook, also known as a collaboration guide or a contributor guide, is this higher order form of scaffolding that brings together multiple pieces of documentation in one place and creates this clear pathway through it. So it could be that there are multiple team members who are coordinating your OSPOs activities, and you might want some of those standard operating procedures and even template emails and templates for how you present calls and things documented together in a playbook to help you scale and stay consistent with what you do. Or it could be that if you're inviting members to take on leadership positions, there's a member-facing playbook that equips them with the various resources that they need to be able to do whatever roles they are playing in the community. So this playbooks course is specifically focused on supporting you in actually building out a playbook, or it could be that you already have some documentation, you just haven't thought about how to aggregate it together in a useful, easy to navigate way. Or it could be that you haven't yet created documentation for certain things. And the course really helps you to think about what questions you need to answer, how to then structure that in a playbook, and how to think about socializing that playbook so that people are actually going to use it, and maintaining it so it doesn't all fall on one person to be keeping that documentation updated. So that's another one of our newer courses. And then finally, question 5, how might you work with champions, so more engaged users within your community, to help scale and sustain the community? So as your community grows, as you're engaging more and more people, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do everything, right? And members may identify particular working groups they want to set up, particular topics that they want to have discussions around and create resources around. And so this champion mode that we see along the bottom of the community participation model is when we really start working with those emergent leaders from within our community and supporting them in helping us to advance the mission of what it is that we are doing. So pushing forward the overall purpose of the community. So this is another one of our guidebooks. It's the part 2 of our community participation model guidebook. So there's a lot more details in there about what champions are, what they do. And then we have a 9-part series of tip sheets that explain how to scaffold out various resources to support champions in your program. So how do you find them? How do you recruit them? Do you need to provide them with any training and materials? And how do you know if it's working? So there's a 9-part tip sheet series on that. And champions are really helpful because they can contribute to the community in 3 broad ways. It can be one of these ways, 2, or even all 3 of these ways. So they may be helping to maintain your community activities on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis. So they might help welcome new members. You know, maybe that you don't need to do all of that yourself now because champions will be able to form a welcome committee. Or it might be that they're serving on a code of conduct committee if that's applicable. Champions can also help you to grow the community. So they might be amplifying what the community is doing. So they could be recommending it to others within your institution. Hey, you know, I'm part of this great group. I've got a lot of value out of this. You know, here's when we convene. Here's how you join. Or they could be taking resources and sharing them with other communities. So it's extending the reach of the community into different spaces. Champions can also help you to evolve your community. So often you start out thinking that you know what your members need and you know what the community's purpose is. And then as the community grows, new needs, new ideas emerge. And so champions can be really helpful for supporting additional special interest groups or working groups that might rise, or even serving in advisory roles so that they're reporting back on things that they're observing more broadly in the ecosystem because they're attending conferences or even participating in other communities. Okay, and so an example project of this is we have worked for many years now with R OpenSci. So this is a community-based project that supports users of R in publishing and reviewing software packages for STEM contexts. And R OpenSci has received a couple of rounds of funding from CZI to design, run, and evaluate a champions program that's intended to increase the number of contributors within the R ecosystem. So we worked with them in all aspects of the program. So we helped to design it, think about what recruitment of champions would look like, what an application process would look like, because all of these things were being done for the first time within our OpenSci. And then we contributed to some of the training that champions received in order to be able to go and host events in their own communities. And then we performed an evaluation of the program by doing interviews and surveys of the champions to see whether any of the culture change that we were hoping to see, so more engagement within the community and more confidence with engaging with the community, had actually been achieved through the program. So if you're kind of thinking about bootstrapping your project and you're thinking about identifying some super users, some emergent leaders as a way of getting various activities started, thinking of them as champions and thinking very intentionally about the steps that you might need to take to support them in getting things off the ground can be really helpful. And that's something that we can definitely help with. Okay, so that's the 5 tips. So just to recap these questions again, who's in your community and who's in the broader ecosystem, and maybe mapping that out if that helps you to visualize things. Really making sure that you've honed the specific purpose of your community, so what members can do together that they wouldn't be able to do alone. Thinking about how you can support multiple modes of participation in the community so that as members' capacity and interest waxes and wanes, as it will do, you will have got multiple ways to participate. And that you're making scaffolding to lower any barriers that might be in place that are preventing them from participating to the full extent. And then thinking ahead and as things scale, how you can engage community champions to really help you continue to grow the various things that you're doing. And I'm just going to finish now with a bonus brand new project that we are in the process of launching. So we've received funding from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to specifically support open source leaders as they are thinking about how to sustain their projects. And so this is a separate project under CSCCE that we are calling Bodaro, which means flock. So this idea that the leaders are going to kind of come together and share various resources and experiences with each other. And one of the very first activities of this new initiative is that we are launching a training program. And so applications are now open. We've soft launched this this week because we're doing a few talks and the timing is right. There will be a website and further information about the program up next week. It is free to attend this. So this is a fantastic opportunity. If budgets are tight, as I know they are for everyone right now, and you're kind of looking at some of our trainings but not sure how to make them work, this training is funded by CZI, so it's at no cost to the participants for this initial pilot go-around. All we require you to do is fill in an application form so that we can make sure that projects are eligible. And this is going to be a 12-week training, a couple of sessions a week that's going to be taking place over the summer this year. Okay, that's what I have for you today. And I just want to give a shout out to the rest of the team. As always, it's a team effort. So Camille and Katie are part of our core team and have been involved in the design of various of the courses. And then the rest of the team supports our course delivery, preparation of materials in Canvas and onboarding and offboarding of our learners. And then thanks also to our various funders. So Sloan Foundation, who seed funded us, CZI, who is funding Bodaro, and NSF, who has funded previous projects that we've worked on. Okay, thanks for listening. Very happy to get into the discussion.